So the Middle-earth Shadow of War announcement trailer just released, and it's got me wanting to talk about my hopes and expectations for the game as a whole, especially since I really enjoyed the first one so much. In fact, I think it's safe to say that that was my favorite game of 2014. And from what I can tell, Shadow of War is going to be a direct sequel to Shadow of Mordor, once again following the journey of Talion and Celebrimbor. For some people, I think this could be a drawback, either because they disliked the characters or maybe the Wraith abilities that came with them. But for me, I can honestly say that I really enjoyed them, and I thought they went very well with the whole Nemesis system that they had in place. The Nemesis system, by the way, looks to be making a return, which for me is definitely a must, because that really is what made the first one so special, at least in my opinion. And I'd imagine that it's going to be a whole lot more in-depth and expansive this time around, hopefully with even more variety to the orcs, or even enemies other than orcs. Other than that, the two main things that have really got me excited were the sheer amount of different enemies that I saw, and also the inclusion of the word war in the title, thus making it seem like this game could end up being on a much bigger scale. Now, don't get me wrong, I loved the stealthy elements of Shadow of Mordor, but I also found myself wanting some larger scale battles with a larger variety of enemies to fight throughout my time in that game, and it seems as though Shadow of War is going to do just that. In this new trailer, we see some very large battles and even some pretty damned big enemies. Of course, you still have the orcs, but this time around it looks as though we're also getting a larger variety of trolls, fell beasts or dragons, the Nazgul, and even a Balrog. In the first game, I thought this was the key part that was missing. I mean, we only really had orcs, some unarmored trolls, and Caragor to fight in that, which was fun, but also got a tad bit repetitive, so I'm happy to see that possibly change. At this point, I really can't be too sure where the bulk of this game is going to take place, other than the fact that it's in Mordor, but the trailer does show off a bit of the Dead City, Mount Doom, and what looks to be the Eye of Sauron, although definitely still under construction. To me, this seems really promising because another thing I loved about the first game was that it mixed up the locations you started out in, which I remember initially being a desolate wasteland, and then it moved you to a much more green coastal area, sort of similar to what The Witcher 3 did later on down the road. So if this game can do that and maybe even take it further, or just have it be one big area, I think that'll work out quite nice in that aspect of the game. In terms of the story, we really aren't given a whole lot, aside from the fact that Talion and Celebrimbor have crafted a new ring to challenge Sauron, all whilst the war for Mordor continues to expand. So overall, somewhat simple, but I think it works and leaves a nice place for Talion's story to continue. However, I must say my biggest gripe with the first one was its ending, and more so its final boss fight. I even remember a lot of the orcs being tougher to kill than the Black Hand, who you fight at the very end, who really just boiled down to quick time events to finish off. I really hope that they take a better approach when it comes to the ending of this game, and maybe even the story overall, especially since it takes place in such a cool time period, which just so happens to be right between the events of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. Other than that, I think if the game brings forth the variety we saw in the trailer and actually includes some of the iconic enemies we saw, like Sauron, the Witch King, and hopefully even Shelob, the giant spider from the third movie, it could lead to some more memorable boss fights. Plus, I can't leave out the fact that the combat system in Shadow of Mordor. It felt like a really nice mix between Assassin's Creed and Batman. So I'm very curious to see how they'll make that work against some of these larger enemies, like the Balrog or Fell Beasts. All that being said, I think this game has a lot of potential to be either as good as the first game or possibly even better. The only thing that really worries me is that it feels like it's only been in development for about 3 years, and I can't begin to imagine how they could turn this into a much bigger game than the first with so little time. But anyways guys, hopefully you enjoyed the video. Feel free to let me know if you're as excited for this game as I am, or just your thoughts in general. Like usual, thanks for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.